Welcome back to the CEO Advantage podcast. Millie, it's great to have you with me again.
Thanks for having me.
We have got our second ever international guest from the UK. I'm really excited. He's a good friend of mine, has been for a long time, a man called Matt Stevenson-Dodd. Let me read you his bio before we get into speaking with him. He has a distinguished career as a charity CEO and key leadership roles as the chair of multiple charities. Matt Stevenson-Dodd brings a wealth of experience to the social impact sector, and we're going to talk to him about his social impact sector business today. As a previous trustee of organisations such as St John's Ambulance and People's Postcode Lottery, Matt has demonstrated a commitment to driving positive change on a global scale. In 2019, Matt founded Trust Impact, pioneering a groundbreaking approach to impact measurement and transparent reporting. Under his guidance, Trust Impact has become a trusted partner to more than 120 of the world's most impactful organisations. Just amazing, empowering them to understand, measure and maximise their social impact. Recognised for his entrepreneurial spirit and dedication to social innovation, Matt was recently honoured with a highly commended award by the Global Association of MBAs for Entrepreneur of the Year in 2024. So he's a bit slow because I was in 2019 with EY, but who's competitive? Matt's passion for creating meaningful change and his proven track record of success make him a dynamic and influential voice in the field of social impact on a global scale. And I am so excited to have you with us, Matt. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
Can I start? How did you guys meet?
So go on, Matt, you start. How did we meet?
Well, I got a scholarship to Harvard in 2012 to do this brilliant course, Strategic Perspectives in Nonprofit Management. And I went all the way over to Harvard. There's a lot of reading to do. Do you remember that, Paul?
Oh, my goodness. 2 big folders you got to read.
Well, it was unbelievable. I was still doing them on the plane over there. It was
So was I.
that much. But we got there and there's we were split into 2 groups. There's a room full of, probably about 80 people, I think. And I just found, as I was answering questions, Paul was also answering the sort of same questions and saying similar things to me. And I thought, I need to talk to this guy. So I think we had the same thought, didn't we, Paul? And
yeah.
Well, halfway through the course, Paul said to me, "Look, let's just go out for dinner on the Wednesday night. We just need to have a chat." And it was brilliant. It was. I always remember it because Paul said to me, "Look, I'm a few years ahead of you where you are, and I just want to share the sort of experiences that I've had running big charitable organisation in Australia." And I learned so much that night, and from there we've been friends ever since.
Awesome.
Wow. See, is that a lovely story? I just remember seeing this guy from the UK and going, "Can I share some of my stories with you?" And he was generous enough to let me. And it was great. And we've been comparing notes ever since. And whenever I'm in the UK, the last time was seemed ages ago, but we caught up for a beer. And we, I think my wife was with me at when we caught up with a beer, wasn't she? Or somebody else was. But anyway, I was really conscious of boring them to death because Matt and I just go on for hours without taking oxygen. So this would probably be one of those times as well, Matt.
Yeah, it's good.
But thank you for asking that.
Yeah, good one.
So let's get with our regular CEO Advantage format. Matt, what was your first job?
Okay. So in the sort of late 90s, I almost was a rock star. And as I say almost, it was so close. But I guess a lot of people say that, don't they? I was nearly a rock star. I did a postgraduate diploma in youth work, and I went down to Plymouth in the UK to do that. And as I got there, and I answered an advert for a bass player in a shop, and it turned out that this band had a management deal. And they were starting to get ready to sort of play to record companies. And this was, I was only 23. This is amazing. I was getting really excited. And we got loads of record company interest. They were also flying down to Plymouth and taking us out and telling us how successful we were going to be. And, and it was a good band. We were really good. And then we got invited up to play for Sony in London. And we had to play for the managing director. And then we played this gig, and we had 18 A&R people in the audience, all sort of, going, "Oh, should we sign this band or not?" And yeah, it was getting really, really exciting. And then we got offered a minor record deal, but the management sort of held out for the big deal, and it never came. And I'd taken out this kind of professional development loan to fund my studies, and I had a 6-month payment window, and I was just like watching this kind of countdown to this 6 months when I had to start paying it back. And eventually, I just thought, you know what, I don't think I'm going to be a rock star this time. I'm going to have to get a proper job and get a paid job. And yeah, that's when I went into youth work, and I've not looked back since. But I always sort of think what it would have been like to be a rock star.
And what was it about youth work that attracted you to the job?
Yeah, so I'd spent my sort of childhood in working in youth groups so I went to this youth group, and it was sort of self-run by young people, and I always loved that. I thought, there's such a power in a group of young people just being able to do stuff, and reach their potential. And I always sort of thought that would be a great job. And I'd gone down to Plymouth to do this sort of postgrad in youth work. So I suppose the rock star bit was a bit of a distraction. But then I got my first job in Newark in Nottinghamshire, as a detached youth worker, sort of working on the streets with groups of young people. I mean, the winters were really cold. I managed 4 winters with been out on the streets. But you sort of think there's loads of young people who are just sort of thrown out of their houses, and they've just got to fend for themselves on the streets. And the job was really to go and work with them and talk to them and find out what was going on and take them on trips. And, we used to drive a minibus to the swimming pool and take them all swimming, or we take them caving or rock climbing. And I love those moments where you could just see young people's perspective just open up, and they could see like that life wasn't this little sort of snippet of life they had on their estate. There was so much more they could do and see in the world. And that to me was just amazing, being a sort of 23-year-old youth worker with a van full of kids, just going and seeing and doing stuff. Yeah, I absolutely love that.
And just having fun, the sounds of it.
Yeah, having fun, definitely.
Yeah.
What led you to make that choice, though, to get into that line of work? You would have been surrounded by people or all sorts of different career options, and particularly as a male in that profession, it's a highly feminized sort of work environment, isn't it? So as a young man making those choices, what drew you to that?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose there's a couple of things. So first of all, I'm adopted. I was adopted at 7 days old, and my mum was in Cape Town. She was English and living in Cape Town. She met my father in Cape Town in 1972. They decided that they didn't want to get married, and my mum came back to Nottingham with the idea to sort of bring me up here. But she couldn't settle, and she was finding it quite difficult. Made a big decision to have me adopted at 7 days old. And at that moment, I was kind of, at the mercy of the social care system in the UK. And, the sort of, Nottinghamshire had afterwards we found out had quite a bad reputation for the care system. There's a lot of abuse in care homes and foster placements. And fortunately, I was adopted by, 2 incredible people, Jill and Jeff, who brought me up, and gave me absolutely everything, gave me every encouragement. I think that's always kind of stuck with me, that sense of what could have been, how that life could have changed, and would I have reached my potential if I'd have sort of remained in the care system. And I think that sort of early motivation always made me think, I'd like to do that for somebody else. I'd like somebody else to have that opportunity to reach their potential and find that. And that's sort of driven my career all the way through. I think also a sense of social justice, a sense of this has to be fair for people. Fairness is really important to me. And then the second thing really was when I was 18, I went to South America and lived in Uruguay for a year. I went to volunteer to build houses for people who are being thrown out of the old city by developers. And I think that sort of early exposure to like incredible poverty that I'd never experienced in my life. Again, also that sense of fairness and sense of social justice really prevailed. So when I came back, I think much to my dad's dismay, I sort of said, look, I'd really like to do a job that helps people rather than just kind of makes money. And that was the motivation, I think.
Just say that. I love that. I love hearing stories that are just, from the heart.
Well, you're going to love lots of Matt stories. They're amazing. Hey, Matt, I want to just touch on, before we move away from this notion of fairness, I have, and you and I have shared this a similar affliction with this very overdeveloped fairness gene, which is a great blessing when it comes to working in the social sector, but equally can be two sides of the same coin, can't it? Because it does breed a fierce intolerance of mediocrity when it comes to people who are a bit loose with their fairness gene or don't have one. Have you found that your strong sense of fairness has been a great benefit most of the time, or have there been times where you've thought, gosh, what's going on?
Yeah. I think you're right. These great strengths are also often great weaknesses, aren't they? And I think for me, it's been probably a sort of really often too focused, relentless sort of pursuit of this is the right thing to do. I think when you're running charities, organisations, I mean these are quite big businesses often, and you have business decisions to make, which are quite tricky. But I often sort of found myself thinking, we're here for the young people. This is what we should be doing. We should be really focused on the young people, and often that's not the only decision you have to look at. I think you have to sort of see this this imbalance. It took me a long time to realise that sort of balance, and I think certainly through my 20s and 30s, I was very, very focused on social change and trying to make that thing fair for everybody, and then you sort of realise that if you just focus on that, you can lose track of where the business is. I was involved in a brilliant startup youth project called Unique Coffee Bar in Newark, and I'd worked with a group of young people when I was a detached youth worker, and they just said, "Look, we'd just really love somewhere to go that we could just call our own, and we could have this place." We found that we could raise some money and take over this old cottage. And we renovated it. We got a load of money. This was back in like 1999, when the money was really flowing, and nobody had any problems raising funds like they do now. But so we managed to convert this beautiful place for young people, and we did it as a kind of 16 to 25-year-old drop-in coffee bar for young people. And it was there that I sort of got this freedom. I'd come out of the youth service. I'd done 3 years working for the council. And I'd always felt like a misfit in the local authority. I'd felt like, I was just too entrepreneurial for them. They didn't like that. They wanted me to just kind of conform and do stuff. I was always trying to break the rules, and I remember saving on my budget and thinking this would be great because I can invest that next year. And they just took it away from me. They just said, well, if you saved on your budget, you don't need it. And I just thought this is just wrong. So after 3 years, I sort of took an opportunity to get out and join the voluntary sector and set up this coffee bar with a group of young people.
And back in 1999, that's now known as a social enterprise, right? But it wasn't called a social enterprise in those days.
No, we were definitely pioneering stuff. I remember that moment, Paul, when I found other social entrepreneurs and thought, oh, this is really interesting, right? Other people are trying to do this. And the first 3 years we were reliant on sort of grant funding, and I thought, this is not going to sustain this organisation. We need to do something more radical. And I was talking to this guy in the youth offending team, and he said, I've got eight young people who are young offenders, and they don't want to go back to school. But the school's really worried about excluding them, because if they do that, they have to pay a lot of money to the pupil referral unit to sort of contain these young people. And I was like, that's just ridiculous. These are young people. These are like, yeah, they've offended, but they're still great people. They've got a lot of potential. So I said, what if we have them at the coffee bar instead? What if we do the school at the coffee bar? And by the way, this was when it was illegal to take young people out of school to do that. But we managed to get this dispensation to do it. And these young people came to the coffee bar, and we did education. And it was just not, it was not rocket science. We treated them with respect, first name terms, no uniform. Let's go, come and let's do some learning together and get some stuff done. And it was brilliant. It worked. We got these 8 young people through the GCSEs. It was really their qualifications. It was really, really important. And I remember the head teacher coming down to me and saying, "How are you getting these kids to sit there and work? These are kids who just wouldn't do anything in school." And I was like, "It's so obvious. You just got to treat them with some respect." And that's what we did. So then there was an opportunity, and because the local head teacher said, "Man, I've got like 80 young people who would benefit from this. Could you take more young people?" So I thought, well, yes, I can, but I'm going to charge you for it, and I'm going to charge an extra on top so I can pay for the rest of the services that we offer. And that was my first entry into social enterprise. I was thinking, I could run a business here with a social purpose that makes a profit, and we use that profit to help provide other services.
In a previous episode with Elizabeth Funk, she talks about how greed can be such a powerful, motivator to make that positive change, especially, when you're doing good and you're making money business at the same time.
Yeah, I think her line was, if fixing the world's ills was profitable, they'd all be fixed. But social enterprise back then was really maverick stuff. This was you were breaking all of the conventions there, and part of the idea of charging as a charity, not just running on donor dollars, but saying, actually, I'm going to charge you, and I'm going to charge a margin. I mean, this was way outside the box in the early 2000s.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I got this sort of sense that this was going to be the future. I thought, you can't just rely on donors to keep this going, because otherwise you're just chasing that all the time. And I suddenly felt, I feel like I'm in control of something now. I feel like I can control our destiny, because if we provide a great product for these schools, right, and we can help these young people get their qualifications, which actually then helps the schools with their points, so their league table points are better. They're not excluding lots of people. They're coming to the coffee bar instead. It's a kind of win-win. And I thought, this is the sweet spot really in the middle here, where the schools are happy, the young people are happy, most importantly, and we are getting an income. This is really, really good. And I remember saying to my friend, like, I've come up through the social world. I don't know anything about running a business, but this is all gut feeling and instinct. And he said to me, "Oh, I'm just about to do an MBA qualification. You should look at that." So I thought, right, what's that? Masters of Business Administration. I'm going to look at that. And I went to the university in Nottingham, and I said, "Look, I'm interested in doing an MBA, but I don't know anything about it." And they told me all about it. And then they said, "Actually, we do the MBA half price for non-profits." So this was like, MBAs cost thousands and thousands. So I went back to my board at the coffee bar and said, "I think this would be a really worthwhile investment, and they're going to pay, they're going to pay half for us if we go and do it." So the board said yes, brilliantly said yes. And I enrolled on this MBA in 2002, and I sort of rocked up in Nottingham with, 50, 60 other people who were all like high flying private sector people who, work for all these big companies. And there was me like running this little social enterprise in Newark. And I learned so much in those 4 years. And I remember just in year one, we must have saved 3 or 4 times the cost of the MBA in just being more efficient, thinking about things in a different way. Why we're just spending that because it's there and doing it. And things really, really changed over those years. And that balance of business and social became so important for me.
What was the name of this business, Matt, at the start?
Unique Coffee Bar.
Oh, Unique Coffee Bar. That's Unique Coffee Bar. Yeah, cool.
So again, for some of our listeners and some of our younger listeners may not realize that in those Wild West days, bringing corporate governance and business practices to charitable work before the idea of social enterprise had really taken hold. You and I were living this, we didn't know each other at this stage, but we were living this parallel life at exactly the same time where I can remember presenting to the board at SYC saying, we've gone earnestly broke every decade of our lives, and the first decision you need to make is a really clear one, and that is make a decision to stop going broke. And it was actually like, it was quite confronting for them. And to their enormous credit, they went, yeah, so what do you want to do? And we started doing things that were unconventional, right through to, we were the 5th not-for-profit in the country to remunerate its board. And that was outrageous. I mean, paying these guys, everybody, you're supposed to be volunteers. And it's like, yeah, but I need professionals to run this business. And so I don't need to thank you and beg you to take a phone call from me. When I call, I need you to answer and I need you to be present. So if I just pay you for that, and we were like, it was only $5,000. It was like they were putting in way more than we were paying for. But it was the idea, right? We were all professionals taking this seriously. And you were doing the same thing in the UK on the other side of the globe at exactly the same time, doing the same thing.
So your board were being paid at the time. They weren't volunteering the time, or?
No, so I had this odd situation where charity boards in the UK aren't allowed to be paid, or in very, very rare circumstances, but generally not. So I decided I would set up a social enterprise board beneath the charity. So the charity wholly owned the subsidiary social enterprise, and then I would do all of the activity through the social enterprise. But even so, we didn't go as far as paying the board. That felt quite radical. But the freedom of having a community interest company that was owned by the charity, well, I felt that was the best thing. I remember we had this pro bono support from Ernst & Young, the accountants, and on VAT treatments, and they came out and they were like, they spent days working with us, and they said, actually, we think we can save you 50 pence. And it was just like this revelation. It's like, we're so sorry. This would normally be millions in a large corporation, but because you're so small, it's only going to be about 50 pence. And I thought, isn't that amazing? You get all this pro bono support, and then it's to run this commercial business, and it results in that.
Which means you were running a great tight ship, as it was.
Yeah, I've always believed in that, Paul. I've always thought you've got to run these social organizations as businesses, as if it's your own money, and because it's got to go to the social purpose. You've got to be trying to do that. I think though, to my detriment, and just reflecting back on the days at Unique, I got really carried away with the idea of being entrepreneurial and trying lots of different things, and we started to expand into loads of different areas and different ideas, and I sort of got this kind of sense that I was completely invincible, that whatever I touched turned to gold, and I could just do it. So we took on a 20,000 square foot warehouse. Can't remember more that would be in meters, like 10,000 square foot warehouse, a square meter warehouse, and we decided to set up this recycling project called a scrap store. So we would take industry's waste materials and we would transform them into play and art materials. So it's things like, like if you're buying a carpet and you've got the 4-meter cardboard tube in the middle of a carpet, we would stock those in the scrap store, and they would become the backbone of a dinosaur in a primary school the next day, or we'd have all these sort of things that industry wanted to get rid of that would be amazing for play. And it was just a beautiful, beautiful place. We employed 6 young people from the coffee bar to run the place. We recycled paint. We did all sorts of things. And this was just amazing. We had visitors from all over the place, but the thing never broke even, right? I mean, it was always almost breaking even, but never quite. So, I remember thinking, well, it's okay because we're recycling 50 tons of business waste every year. This is it's a good thing. We're employing these young people, so that's good. And then I decided we'd franchise the coffee bar idea into other towns. So we started to look at that. I looked at opening an arts centre in Newark, and it's just going bigger and bigger and bigger, and more ideas. And and then the financial crash happened in 2008, and it was like, wow, we suddenly ran out of money very, very quickly, as you were saying, Paul. And it was a real wake up call to me. It was a real wake up call. I thought, I've just spread myself way too thinly here. I've just tried to do too many things. There's no clear focus to this organization. And actually, this was about young people right at the beginning, but now it's about trying to run as many different innovative businesses as I could. And we had to be bailed out by a much bigger organization that came and merged with us. But it was a real lesson in overextending and not having that focus.
Did it take you a little while to recover from that with your, did your creativity tap was just turned off during that time just to survive? Was it turned on again at some point, and when was that?
I think that's a really good point. I did take a bit of a knock from that, when you sort of feel like I'm invincible, I can do everything, and then suddenly you can't. And I felt, I needed to sort of regroup and recalibrate and think about, okay, what did I learn from that? I think I've just got this overarching sense of optimism though. I think it's like, I think the world is going to be good. I always do. And it just maybe takes me a little time to get back to that, but then it did. I so went and did a job in the northwest of England at Young Enterprise, which was, again, it was just more of a kind of temporary job of being CEO of that organization. And then I saw an incredible opportunity in 2010 to join a charity called Street League, which was an organization that had been set up in 2002 by a doctor working in London. And he'd seen the same homeless people coming through his A&E department, his emergency department, and decided to try and do something about it. So he set up a street football league for homeless people to play football, which became called the Street League. And it's just an incredible idea. To use football to engage people was so powerful. And Damien decided he was going to leave in 2010, and job came up, and I was fortunate enough to get that job. And what I found was an organization that had this incredible power at the heart of it. And again, my optimism kicked in, and I thought, this is just so incredible. But like Unique Coffee Bar, it was trying to do way too many different things. So as a lot of organizations, they'd sort of found that there was money in lots of different areas. So from that initial start of homelessness and football, they were working with asylum seekers. They were doing mental health projects. They were doing employability projects, and we were like, trying to be experts in everything. And I think that sort of sense of we need to focus, we need to be clear, really kicked in, and we decided to make some pretty radical changes to Street League.
So how long were you at Street League for, Matt?
9 years in total, from 2010 to 2019. So when we met at Harvard in 2012, I was 2 years in, and that sort of moment was quite transformative for me. Just thinking about, what is it that we actually do? What are we trying to do here? And how do we take this organization to the next level? And, that conversation we had on the Wednesday night really, really sort of helped with that, because I went back and thought, we're doing way too much. We're just trying to do everything for everybody, and we need to be really clear. So we sort of decided we refocus on sport for employment, that we would use football to help young people get jobs, and that we'd stop working with old people and young people, that we'd focus on 16 to 25s. So it's quite radical. And I remember my management team saying to me, this is the wrong thing to do. You are doing the wrong thing here. Why would you want to stop this £300,000 of mental health money that we're getting every year? And I said, because we're not very good at mental health, right? We're trying to do too many things, and we're not very good at all of them. So let's focus. And a couple of the management team left. They weren't happy with the decision. Our income dropped. It went down. And, you've got all these people around you going, this is the wrong thing to do. Fortunately, I had a really good chair, a guy called Mike Parker, who was just amazing. And he and I felt this was the right thing to do, to be focused and clear. And then after that, our income rose and we grew really rapidly, between 20 and 40% a year. We went from working in 2 cities in the UK to 14. We went from like 20 staff to 150 staff. We went from, most importantly, I think, just helping a handful of young people with jobs to about 1,600 a year. And these were young people in the most disadvantaged communities. So that sort of focus and that clarity of purpose, and that also saying we're not going to do these things and we are going to do these things, that really helped the organization.
In my 25 years as a CEO, one of the hardest things to find was a consulting and advisory firm where they'd actually been CEOs. I created CEO Advantage to be the advisory firm I was looking for. Go to ceoadvantage.com.au and find out how we can help you and your team be the best in the business.
There would have been a moment, especially when a lot of your probably key managers were leaving, that you would have had this huge level of doubt, like, is this the right decision? Am I, should we be doing this? But I think to have the chair by your side, like, that would have given you that, no, we're on the right path. This is the right way forward.
Yeah, I think you always have that in the back of your mind. Am I doing the right thing? But to the earlier point about, that relentless focus on social justice and fairness, and also my overwhelming optimism, I think it always makes me sort of burn quite brightly in these things. On the converse side, looking back, I think that only lasts for so long with me. I can do that for so long, and then it probably just needs something else, like Unique Coffee Bar, where that got to. I'm an innovator. I like to push things, I like to develop things, but I don't really like the kind of long-term stability stuff. I'm a builder and a maker of things, I think.
It was interesting when I never thought that I would be anywhere for 18 and a half years like I was at SYC. But as my running gag, I used to always say, they only gave me a 1-year contract. I'm just on my 18th version of it. But on reflection, much like you, I can't maintain it. So I just reinvented it all the time to make it interesting. And by reinventing it and making it interesting, but with a really strong sense of fairness and a clear sense of purpose, which is we exist for young people, and also a really ferocious language around. Like, it was really interesting. And I remember I visited you at Street League, and we had a conversation about the interesting thing of running an organisation that's focused on youths, or as people called them, but we would call them young people, is that when you really challenged members of the community about young people, their mouths moved as if they cared about young people. But we knew that at barbecues and in your kitchen, they were saying, where are their parents? And people hated young people. And they'd say, no, I don't. And I go, cool, what have you, but it doesn't take very much for it to come out, because it's one of the 2 things that our community still accepts. You can't say anything racist. You can't say anything sexist, but you can say whatever you like about young people, and everybody starts to join in and go, yeah, they're bad. And the only other group you can do that is old people. Oh, dotty old people. Oh, yeah, they're old Karens. And you can pile on old people and you can pile on young people with impunity. But you can't do it with any other group anymore but young people. And we would just challenge people to say, that's what you're like. So we have to run good businesses and we have to run really good enterprises, because you're not going to give us money to do it, or you're going to make us say thank you. Instead of you saying thank you to us for the great work we're doing with young people, you're going to want us to somehow say thank you with our hands out. And there's part of that sense of fairness in both you and I, Matt, was like, we refuse to say thank you. We want you to step up and do your job, right?
I had this great moment. It was quite early on in Street League. We were working with this young guy called James, and he was really drifting. He didn't know what he was going to do. He played football with us. He didn't have a sort of sense of any purpose in his life, what he wanted to do. And I just thought I could see something in this guy, right? He's got something. He's really, really good, but he's just not had a great childhood, doesn't know where he's going, doesn't know what he's going to do. And I'd said to a friend of mine who's running a really successful business, would you take James on a work experience placement? Just humor me. I think this guy is good, right? And she said, yeah, I'll do that. And she actually said to me, can I just be careful? Will James be okay with us? He's not going to steal from us or anything like that, is he? And just that sense of, I don't know what young people are like, what this is going to be like. And she was right to ask the question. And I said, no, he's a good guy. He's okay. He's okay. And he went and did this sort of week's work experience in it's a sort of high tech company, real sort of cutting edge company. And she said, look, you've done brilliant, but that's all we had. We had a week's work experience. We might have some jobs coming up. 6 months later, a job came up, and unbeknownst to me, he applied for the job and he got it. He got the job. And then he sort of went on and ended up running teams and companies, part of the company with them, and just got this whole career out of this, this opportunity that he'd taken. And this was a kid who you'd looked at him and you would have thought, nah, he's not going to do that. But I think that sort of believing in young people and then giving them that opportunity and trusting them with that opportunity. And I remember saying to him before he went on the work experience, James, this is a really good friend of mine, right? Do not mess this up. And he sort of laughed and said, no, I won't mess this up. I'm going to do this. And he did. It was amazing.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And one of the things that you touched on was how the Unique Cafe got a return on its investment in the MBA, a fourfold return on investment by getting better and saving money and your skills. And again, that was when we met in 2012 at Harvard. It was all about how do you measure the value, or how do you place a value on what didn't happen? So it was the emergence back then, 2010 through to 2012, they called it results-based accounting, and then they called it social SROI, social return on investment. And then it turned into avoided cost modeling and actuarial calculations on avoided cost. And of course, treasuries within government were like, yeah, but then they wanted to do what was called an attribution approach, where it's like, can you prove that what you did made a difference that otherwise wouldn't have happened downstream? It's like, this is now becoming a ludicrous, furphy language of social impact turning into a nonsense, right? It became really sexy for a while, and everybody got involved in social impact bonds. And in the UK, you had the Big S movement there, the big society movement. Talk to us about those early days of avoided costs and results-based accounting and all of that, because that'll lead us to trust impact and where we are. But talk to us about your time in not-for-profit land and that crazy period of inventing measures.
Yeah, I think it was all driven by this idea that people wanted to know, do you actually make a difference? Is the money that we're putting into this actually making any difference at all? And it's a problem that people have tried to deal with for decades, but nobody really got there. And like you say, the sort of social return on investment thing was so complicated. It's such a complicated way to measure things. And what you come out with is a kind of, hey, Matt, for every pound that you spend, you save the taxpayer £5. And then somebody else will say, well, I save the taxpayer £10 for every pound that I spend. So which is better, your social enterprise or mine? And they try and compare them in that way, and you can't compare them. It just really doesn't work. So you get this kind of this very complex set of measures that comes in, and people try to sort of apply this. And we did it at Street League. We were encouraged to do it. We did a social return on investment. It took months and months of time to do. It was out of date as soon as we'd done it. So you you're like, well, that was last year's social return investment. Now, do we have to do that whole exercise again to get there? And I just remember saying to Mike, the chair, look, there's got to be a simpler way to do this. Right? We've got to really think about this in a much simpler way. And the other thing that I'd noticed with Street League is we'd invested heavily in understanding the journey of our young people. And this was really because when I got there, we were saying, hey, we help 3,000 young people a year. And I remember saying to the team, how do we know that? Oh, well, it was 2,800 last year, so we just added 200 to it and made it 3,000 because we've probably grown. I was like, what? That's really not good. And we do this sort of annual survey of 100 people, and then we'd extrapolate that up and make some ridiculous claims. Like 10 of those people gave up smoking. So Street League helps 10% of people give up smoking every year. It doesn't. That just doesn't work. So I thought we've got to do something more rigorous, and we invested in tracking the journey of every young person through the organisation, from the day we say hello to them to the day they get a job, and then most importantly, do they stay in the job for 6 months? And by about 2016, we've got some incredible evidence, internally, and every annual report we put out, every statement we put out was just getting lost in this mix of everybody else's annual reports. And I said to Mike, everybody just talks about success all the time. You read these reports and it's like, we're amazing. Turn the page. Hey, this is incredible. Look at this young person who's done amazing stuff. Here's a great case study. I was like, they can't be all getting this right all the time. Surely things have got to be tricky for them. And the kind of the maverick bit kicked in me, and I thought, you know what? I'd like to publish an annual report that talks about failure rather than success. What if we did that? That would really stand out, and it would really change the narrative. So I took this draft to the board, and you open sort of page 1, and it said, last year we failed 109 young people. This was the opening. And the board, deep intake of breath around the board table. Whoa, what? You want to put this out? No. Failure is not a good word to use. We can't do this. We talked it through, had this big sort of discussion, and we watered it down a little bit. We said last year we weren't able to help 109 people, but the concept stood. And one of the board members said, I read that honesty up front about what you didn't get right. And then I believed the 1,281 young people who we did help. I believed you after that because I'd read that bit that was up front that's negative. And they said, yes, we'll publish it. But you have to phone all of our funders and you have to say to them, we're going to be honest about not being able to help people. Will you still fund us? And of course, I rang every funder and every one of them said, Matt, this is exactly what we want from organizations. We want to know. We want to be able to help you. We want to be able to understand what's not working. But all we get is, we're successful. We're amazing. We're such a great company, And then I also wrote an article for The Guardian, national newspaper, on charities needing to be more transparent and needing to be more open. And my argument really was, if we are genuinely wanting to solve these biggest problems in the world, we have to take risks. And if we don't take risks, we're not going to solve these problems. And if we take risks, we're not always going to get things right. And if we don't always get things right, we should be honest about that, and we should be open about the learning that we're having from that. So I published the Guardian article on the day that the charity accounts came out. Did videos and all sorts of things. I thought, I'm just going to go all in here. And this, Paul, thinking about it, was probably that sense of, I want to reinvent things. I want to change things. Again, 6 years into my job, I want to make things different. And it was really well received. I mean, Street League's reputation went up. We were sort of speaking at things, writing for things, all sorts of stuff. We got more funding in, lots of interest. And I thought this was going to be the start of this big charity transparency revolution. Matt, you've done it. You've kicked off this kind of amazing thing that's going to change the world. And one other charity did the same. So I just remember thinking, wow, why is this not happening? Why are people not following this? This should be the future. And the answer, I went around and talked to people, and the answer was, I just don't get impact. Impact's too complicated. I can't do what you've done. And frankly, the world operates on nice stories and people giving us money because we're a great organization. And that just was like a spark for me. I just thought, this has got to change. We've got to try and change this. And that sense of impact measurement being complicated and only a thing that a university could do with you, and it results in a kind of 500-page report, and somewhere in the middle is this like gem of stuff about it. I thought, this is all wrong. It's completely wrong. We have to be more simple and more focused and more clear.
Yeah. And what gets lost in that conversation is it the right thing to do for its own sake? We're so busy because it creates this narrative around you have to justify your existence and you have to justify your activities. And it's like, where's the part where it's just the right thing to do? And we used to have really great fun with social impact, doing for every $1 government spends with us, we return $4.24 to the economy. And so in Australia, we've got the superannuation guarantee scheme where, 11% of your wage goes into superannuation, etc. And my throwaway line was, so if I 4x'd your super year on year, would you give it to me? People go, well, yeah. And I go, cool. So why won't you fund work with young people when it is worth a 4x return to the economy? Oh, and by the way, it's a nice thing to do. And people go, oh, well, oh, yes, it is. And we go, this is it. The powerful part about at least the social impact measurement is it gave you the opportunity to call bullshit, excuse the expression, but call bullshit on this well-intended but feckless groups of people who would come together and they would say, oh, we're collaborating and we're doing these wonderful things for young people and whatever. And it's like, yeah, but the situation for young people is getting worse, so it can't be that good. And they'd say, oh, but we're collaborating. I go, yeah, I don't reckon there's a homeless girl out on the street that gives a rat's ass about us sitting in this warm room collaborating. Like, what she wants is a home and she wants to be safe. And she wants to go back to school and she wants a future and all those things. She doesn't care about us talking about it. But did you find, Matt, that in the charity sector and the not-for-profit sector, you're expected to be polite and tame? They like you to be polite and tame. And if you come in and you get a bit cross with them or you call them out or you call BS on the good outcomes, it's like, oh, don't say that because the funders won't fund us. Be nice.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. I think there's a lot of people just not really telling the whole story. A lot of the time, when the last few years at Street League, I was sort of saying to my fellow CEOs, wouldn't you just want to know if you weren't actually doing the job you think you're doing? Because the whole thing seems to just rely on gut feeling. Hey, I've got a couple of nice glossy case studies and some lovely photos, and I've got a gut feeling that everything's going well. But is it? Surely you just want to know, right? You want to spend that money more wisely so you could actually make that difference to people. But it feels like the whole thing sort of supports itself in this kind of sense of, the funders just want to know, did my money do some good stuff so they can report back to their board to say, yeah, hey, all good stuff was happening. Great. We spent the money well. It's all good. And the charities just want good stuff and the boards of charities just want good stuff. So it's sort of almost this sense of you have to have success built into the whole thing. And in reality, we're operating in very complicated situations where success is not guaranteed and actually shouldn't be guaranteed. We should be taking risks. We should be trying things that are brand new. I often have this conversation with funders now. They say, where do you think I should spend this money? And I always say to them, what you should do is put 20% of your fund aside for failure. And you should openly advertise that this is a fund for people to fail with, that we want you to go and experiment with things. We really want you to make mistakes. We want you to try things. We want you to collaborate with people you'd never even thought of collaborating with before. And we don't care if it works. Right. What we want, what we're buying from you with this 20% is learning. We want to know what you understood from this, what you gained from this, what could we all learn together from this? Because we're not solving these problems. They're just not working in the silos that we're all in. And somehow we're not making that change. So I always say to them, look, just be be disruptive. Like, do 20%. It's only 20%. You can spend 80% on the rest of the things that you've always done, but use that 20% to change things, to make things different. I haven't convinced one funder yet.
Oh, you haven't? Well, because I was going to ask, like, what are some of what would have been some of the craziest ideas that you would have seen emerge from that 20%? Like, there would be so many.
But that's the really exciting bit, isn't it? I mean, that's the kind of like, what could they be?
Yeah.
I mean, it could be just incredible, but nobody has the opportunity to do it. Nobody's given the permission to do it. And to try things. They have to say, because of the thing we've just been talking about, where everybody's like, here's our funding, you do this. You have to sort of work out from day one what you're going to be doing in 3 years' time when you apply for the funding. Who knows, right? Everything can change, but you have to sell the funder that sort of vision, and this is what we're going to do. And then if you don't deliver it, it's really not the way to make things change and happen. And as a result, people set off on these little journeys with that funding and just deliver that project. And it becomes very sort of transactional in its nature, and it's not innovative. It's not responsive. It's just, and you lose that sense of change that you could get. So, I keep arguing. I'm one small voice on this, but I think we need to try and do funding in a different way that allows social entrepreneurs on the front line to experiment and try things.
People like to think they are. They like innovation as long as it doesn't disrupt their comfort, or disrupt their power base, or disrupt their sense of identity. So it's a romantic notion that they want innovation, but the reality is inertia is one of the most effective killers of innovation there is. And people think that inertia is created by the boring or indolent. It's not. It's created by the well-meaning, long-serving, stable people who say, well, look, this is how things really work, and it's nice that you want to do something new, Millie. We tried that back in 1993 and it didn't work, so we're not going to do that again. And it sounds very reasonable and safe and whatever, but it kills innovation so effectively. And so the bigger the funds, they build in governance processes that kill, like by their very nature, innovation is killed by the paperwork that they generate in order to receive the funds. We've got two big multi-billion-dollar funds in Australia that could meaningfully change the way the human services sector work, and they've asked for feedback. Well, they do lots of consultation and feedback forums on how we could do innovation, and they're really lovely and they're well attended and they're brilliantly run and brilliantly catered for. So you get a good feed and nice stay somewhere. And you know what? And they've multi-billion-dollar funds. They could disrupt broken systems. Yet they settle straight back into behaving like government. They behave like a government department because they get so, by the time it gets to the board, goes through all these layers of management, the not-for-profit industry settles back into inertia. And it's incredibly frustrating for... well, not for people like me, of course, I just accept it. But it's frustrating for people like Matt. But Matt, where did you go after Street League?
So I think I got to about 2016 and I was feeling like Street League was growing brilliantly, we had a great team, people doing really good stuff. But it started to get into that sort of managerial, running a business sort of stuff. And so I started to think, right, what can I do? And I started to, as I say, look at sort of disrupting impact measurements and trying to innovate around that. And to the point you just made, Paul, I went for a few jobs as a CEO of different charities. And interestingly, they all said, hey, Matt, we really like your track record of being innovative and disrupting, and this organization's looking for a disruptor. And okay, that's great. That's me. I can do that. This is going to be really good. And I go to the interviews and the board would be like, yeah, we're really excited about, making change, and we really want to change things here. And then they'd appoint the safe pair of hands.
Yeah.
Every time. Every single time. It must have happened like 2 or 3 times. And I just thought, I'm not going to get this job, right? Because they say they want me, they say they want disruption, but actually in reality they don't. They just want it to carry on and change. And I thought I've got to do something different here. So I remember saying to Emma, my wife, look, I'd love a job where I could just do innovation, impact, and challenging the system, just trying to make things different. And she said to me, well, why don't you then? Why don't you just do it? And I'm like, well, wow, that's quite a big thing. And she was like, well, what would it look like? And I said, well, it's probably a consultancy. I probably would go and help people. I don't know whether there's anybody who'd be even interested in that, in actually being able to help people with impact. And so I had a few conversations with my sector peers, and they were like, impact's just super complicated. It's actually often an afterthought. It's like, we do all this stuff, and could somebody go and find the impact, please? And I was thinking, well, impact should be at the heart of your strategy if you're a social purpose organization. Why is it an afterthought? Why are we not thinking this is why we exist? It's like, but the whole organizations have got into this space of we exist to exist, not we exist to make a change and make a difference. So I thought, I'm going to try it. And Emma agreed that we'd put our savings on the line, and I set out on my own, January 2019, set up a business called Trust Impact, and thought, I'm going to try it. And fortunately, I got a few sort of little jobs and people coming in. And I thought, well, I'm going to see how that goes. And then in the summer of 2019, I had a conversation with YMCA England and Wales, and they said, we're a federated structure of about 100 organizations, and each of these organizations is local, and they've all set up their impact measurement on their own. So we're trying desperately to work out what is the combined impact of this quite large organization. I mean, they were like combined turnover about 250 million. They would be the biggest youth organization in the country combined. They said, we just don't know how to do it. We don't know how to bring this information together other than putting out a survey every 2 years that people fill in and tell us what we're doing, but it's out of date and we can't bring it up to date. So I'd been working with a guy I'd known for ages, a guy called Alex, who does all of our data stuff now. And Alex said, I think I can join these databases together, these databases. I think I can translate them into a common format, and then we can display the data in real time, right? So we could actually, for the first time, know how many people are being accommodated in YMCAs across the country, how long they stay, whether they go onto a positive or negative destination, where did they go, all these things, we could bring it together. And brilliantly, YMCA said, go for it. Let's try it. Let's see if we can do it. So they took us on. It's our first big contract, and we joined together the databases of 5 YMCAs out of the 100. The most enthusiastic ones, the ones who were like, yeah, we'll play ball with you, And we produced this dashboard, a real-time impact dashboard, live data, showing the people being accommodated in those YMCAs. And we took it to the AGM in December of the YMCAs, and there's about 150 people in the room. And we showed them, this is what's possible. You could do this if you work together and come together. And the sort of reaction was brilliant. I always remember it. People were like, I want that. That looks really good. We could do that. And we've worked with them ever since, and we've built this out. We now get data on all of their services. We've come together. We're pretty much at about 80 YMCAs are involved. But it's just transformational. That power of live data to show real time what's happening, not out of date. You're not looking in the rearview mirror all the time. You're looking forward, and you're seeing this is what we can do, and it's simple and straightforward. Yeah, and that's been the sort of premise of Trust Impact all the way through.
And how does YMCA use that data, and how do they use that story to improve, innovate, how are they using that story to benefit YMCA and the young people?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, if you're the chief executive of YMCA, you can now go and see a government minister, pull out your laptop and say, you want to see what's happening now? We are accommodating this many young people. This is what the need is right now, and this is how we're responding to that need. And we've got maps and heat maps, and you can see where the deprivation is, and you can see where YMCA are, and you can see how they're working. But it's that sense of this is live, and this is now, And you can also sort of see where the sort of latent demand is, and you can see the change that's happening over time, and you can make the case in real time. So lots of our clients have multiplied their funding by being able to make that case really clearly and transparently. And transparency is the other thing. So we talked to YMCA about, look, you could just paint this as success, right? Or you could actually say, this many young people also didn't get a good outcome. And what were those outcomes? So if you look on their dashboard, you can see that a certain number of young people actually went to prison after being in YMCAs. A certain number are sleeping rough. A certain number are in hospital, or they're in custody, or whatever it is. But they're not hiding that. The fact is that this is a difficult situation that they're working in. Not everybody's going to be successful, and they show that. And I think that transparency is really, really powerful when you're trying to raise funds and engage stakeholders and bring people together. But also for your staff team as well. The staff team in the YMCA can see this. They can see in real time, what are we actually doing? What's the difference we're making? Where are we, in terms of our goals?
Yeah, it really aligns with the mission. This is what we're all about. Matt, I was thinking, what are some of the advice that you can share with current CEOs who are, thinking, okay, we need to measure impact, but I don't know how. Where can they start, and what do they need to do?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And Amelia, you're right. It's all about that core mission, core purpose. So we always start with that. And we ask the question, Paul will remember this from Harvard. What is it you do? What does the organization actually do? So we say to people, can you describe that in 8 words or fewer? Tell me in 8 words, what is the difference that you're trying to make? What is the organization's core purpose? Interestingly, right, we built this tool. It's available on our website, trustimpact.com. It's a tool called the Purpose Alignment Tool. So you kind of set it up, and then it asks all of your senior team to describe the purpose in 8 words or fewer. And then we built an algorithm that kind of crunches that together and tells you how aligned your team is, gives you a score. Then the average alignment is 46%. So what that
Wow.
means is your team does not have the same view of the purpose as you do. And we find this so often. And it's natural, right? People think, hey, of course everybody agrees with me, right? That's my version of the truth. So everybody else automatically will agree with me. But you've got organizations who evolve over time. New people come in, they come in to do different things. They all have a slightly different version of what the purpose is. And if you don't align on that, you then have multiple versions of success that you've got to try and measure. And that's when it becomes really complicated. So we always start with this thing about purpose, right? What is that core truth that you're trying to do? And can you all align on it and not have one that's really broad, like we help people? Get really, really focused. What is it you're actually trying to do? Then you can measure it.
Isn't that just a mic drop moment, though, that Matt's just talked about? That there's an old saying that says success has 1,000 fathers, but failure is an orphan. But what Matt also just sort of said is success has 1,000 stories. And so impact, though, has a purpose. And so you've got to bring those 1,000 stories together into a purpose. And you've worked to create a tool and create a methodology for starting to bring those 1,000 stories together. It's like, a Dr. Evil laser beam, all bringing all the pieces together to focus its impact, right?
Yeah, that's it. It's putting impact at the heart of what you do. We often talk about form and function. So in good design, form follows function. You design something, you think, I want a torch to shine the way. So then you think about the design of that torch. It needs to be portable. It needs to have a light at the front. It needs to have batteries. You design it afterwards. What we often find is that organizations get fixated on the form and not the function. So they think, hey, this is how we run. This is how we always run. We'll just keep running like this. But they forget why they're running. What is the function of this thing? What is the thing? And that function has to be first. You have to put that first. And what we often find with organizations as well is over time, they just proliferate. They go bigger and bigger and bigger in terms of what they're trying to do. Hey, yeah, we've got an arm that does this. We've got an arm that does that. It was very much like Street League. We help mental health. We do asylum seekers. We do everything. But that's not the purpose, right? The purpose was to do something with the power of sport to help people. So let's come back to that core purpose. We often work with organizations where we'll say, You can't be all things to everybody. You have to choose where you are. What is your unique role in this ecosystem of other people who are doing lots of other things? Where's the thing that you'll add the most value? Where do you really want to make your impact? And it's often a real sort of light bulb moment for people where they'll say, I don't know why we do this thing over here, right? We've always done it, but why do we do it? We don't need to do this. It's not in line with our core purpose.
Harvard and Stanford do another program called Leading Change and Organizational Renewal. And what's really important in what Matt just talked about then is around the world, organizations, whether they're irrespective of their tax status or their purpose, are obsessed with change. And with AI and all these things happening, people are like, we got to change, we got to change, we got to change. But the real conversation that gets missed is the organizational renewal. It's like, can we do change but keep the organization the same? Can we do change but keep the power structures the same? Can we do change but leave the budgeting process the same? And it's like, no. Well, we say no to change. It's like, cool. There's a great saying that says, if you don't like change, you'll like irrelevance less. And what you're talking about, Matt, is very challenging for boards and organisations, because by bringing this together, you're also running the risk of shining a light on their unwillingness to innovate, or maybe their inability to innovate, but certainly their unwillingness for organisational renewal, right? Because that's the risk you're creating for them. So while your passion for it and the logic of it makes a lot of sense, it would be easy for people to go, wow, let's just proliferate what Matt's doing, but you'd be crashing into resistance for this good idea. But it would never be spoken about. The reason I'm resisting it is because I'm trying to preserve my identity and my job. No one says that out loud. They just sabotage you. Talk to us about the resistance to this amazing work you're doing and amazing technology. What does resistance look like and sound like?
Yeah, we do get a lot of this, and it's often that you'll find on that spectrum, the chief executive will think one thing, and the chair will think something completely different. When you get down to purpose, and we do this lovely exercise where we call it strategic tensions. So we will work with the organization and we will try and understand what is preventing them from telling this really clear impact story. And we'll set up these kind of juxtaposition sort of tensions, right? So I'll give you an example. We work with the Refugee Council in the UK, and we said to them, where do you think you'll make the most impact? At one end of the spectrum, working directly with individual refugees, or at the other end of the spectrum, changing government policy? Where do you think this organization will make the most impact? And their team were completely split along that line as to where they thought the most emphasis should be put. So people at one end were saying, we need to be working with every refugee in the country. At the other end, they were saying, no, every bit of our effort needs to go into changing government policy. That's where we're going to make the most change. And the reality is it's going to be somewhere along that line, but they need to choose, and those colleagues need to come together to say, this is what we're going to do. Because at the moment, we're all trying to do different things and we've all got different priorities.
And you do your bit and then team up with an organisation that does the other bit and work together.
Yeah, that's it. And then it's the organizational change, but you've got to have that plan and you've got to start with that purpose. So we always say, can you identify a really clear core purpose that everybody agrees on and that you completely align on? That's where you get a lot of resistance, but you've got to have those conversations. And organizations don't tend to do that themselves because there's all sort of, history and vested interests and all sorts of things. And that's where we can facilitate that from an outside point of view and say, you've got to answer these questions. You've got to be clear about these things. We take them through that. Then you can ask a very simple question. How do we know that purpose is happening? And what would be the 3 to 5 things that would tell you that is actually happening, rather than trying to measure 200 different things? What if you only focused on 3 things that would tell you that you're making your core purpose and you got dead good at it? And then to your earlier point, Paul, you can then say to funders, don't ask me to collect 200 different things, right? We're really good at these 3 things that will tell you whether we're actually doing our job. And you should be satisfied with that. And if you're not, and you want us to collect other things, that's going to be expensive and you're going to need to pay for it. But we are really good at collecting these 3 things.
So Matt, this is your work here is and this movement of thinking, this changing of thinking, the idea of in a world at the moment that seems to lurch from certainty, you're either certain on the left or certain on the right, and you're saying, well, actually, embrace tension, which is, you're inviting again resistance, aren't you? Because you're saying the certainty, the certainty is in the uncertainty, and by creating alignment, it requires you to be curious about working a different way, and it requires you to let go of being certain. How do you see at the moment? You're seeing in the UK, you're seeing it across Europe, and now you're seeing in China and the US, this sort of lurching from one side to the other, but with an intolerance for anything that's in the middle. There's even, I don't know if they're saying this in the UK, they're saying it here, that 2024 was the year that woke broke. And so, now Trump's sort of giving permission to now give, no diversity, equity, inclusion, no all these different things, and genders, male or female, all those. There's this now almost embracing of intolerance. Yet your work is designed on the basis of becoming curious. How are you going about dealing with that sort of narrative and encouraging a movement away from that kind of certain narrative?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I mean, for me, I think the foundation of all of this is learning. That's where we actually need to get to. Is an appreciation that we're not all going to get things right, and that we have to actually learn and share that learning as widely as possible. We're doing some work with quite a few funders at the moment in the UK, and trying to sort of say to them, what if you got live data from the organizations that you're funding in real time, and you could, rather than waiting for 6 months for a report back from them, which is going to be nice and lovely report with lots of photos, nice stories and things, probably won't tell you what you want to know. What if you could see the data that they're seeing on the work they're doing for you right now in real time? What would that change for you? And it's really interesting. It changes the relationship between the funder and the organization, between the donor and the organization, because the donor has to accept that they're not going to get a lovely straight line of lovely stories. It's going to be a bit chaotic. It's going to be up and down. Things don't happen in a lovely straight line. So they have to be less punitive about the information they're getting. They can't just overreact and go, hey, you're making mistakes there, and we're going to withdraw our funding. They have to go along the journey with them. But equally, the organization has to be really transparent and open about what that journey is. And we're starting to see some really interesting results from that. People sharing things in real time, being open. So to answer your question, Paul, it's really about, I think, creating a groundswell of organizations that want to try and do this in a different way. They want a very clear sense of purpose. They want simple measurement. They want live data, and they're going to show what they're learning.
What an incredible opportunity that creates that Matt's talking about there, because go back to Elizabeth Funk's point around if social ills could be cured profitably, they'd all be cured. What Matt's talking about there is bringing reality to the conversation around improving social conditions. Goes up and down and it wins. And if you're able to map that with data, there is a very similar data set and a very similar trajectory that occurs that wealthy people use. Mm-hmm. It's called the stock market. Mm-hmm. The stock market goes up and down wildly from hour to hour, minute to minute and whatever, but generally speaking, it trends up over time. But it trends up in what looks like a chaotic sort of up and down. And Matt, you're suggesting that imagine if you could map social impact and have people understand that there are ups and downs, but overall it trends in the right direction, just like the stock market. It's quite an incredible opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it, Paul. It's exactly that. But that's the reality. That is what actually happens. You know it, I know it from running organizations, that you'd never get lovely straight lines of things. Things do break. And if you're actually doing your job properly, if you're trying to tackle these social problems, then you're not going to get everything right. And that should be the norm. We should accept that. Back to the 20% failure fund. We should accept that failure is built into a normal process. And if we don't, then we're not taking any risks, and we're not trying to change things. We're not moving anything forward.
So for any funders around the world and not-for-profit organisations or for-purpose organisations around the world, you should be using the Trust Impact platform, and you should be contributing to the data set that shows, like the NASDAQ, the FTSE, the ASX, all of those. If you all jump onto a Trust Impact platform and amalgamate that data, we'll show social good over time in a sensible way. Matt, I want to move away now from Trust Impact as we start to wrap up, and come back, because almost full circle in your non-earnest life, you're back playing in a band again, aren't you?
I am. Yeah, I'm playing a 90s indie cover band here in North Wales called the Bright Lights, and I absolutely love it. I love it. I love that era of music, the 90s. Yeah, I'm showing my age here, Paul, but that is my favourite stuff. And do you know what's amazing, right? We play these gigs now. We play 50th birthday parties and we play weddings and all sorts of things. But the number of like 20-somethings in the audience who know all the words to the 90s songs, and I'm just amazed by it. They're singing along, they're loving it. It's great.
Fantastic. Hey, mate, so you've had a really lousy day. You've had a series of bad meetings and been frustrated, and you're driving home in your what's that fancy new van you've got?
Oh, I've got an ID Buzz.
An ID Buzz.
Electric van.
I haven't
Amazing.
seen that.
It's like a mini combi van, but it is the coolest thing.
It's so cool.
It is a cool little thing. So you're driving along in your ID Buzz, having had a frustrating day, and a 90s song comes on the radio, and no matter how mad or frustrated you are, you can't not smile. What is it?
So it's my favorite song, and it's a little bit melancholy actually, but it always makes me smile. It's a song by Elbow called "Scattered Black and White," and every time I hear that song, it's just so beautiful. Guy Garvey sings it just amazingly, but the lyrics are about sort of memories, and it's like he talks about his childhood, and he talks about his grandfather, and he talks about all sorts of things in it, and it's just the most beautiful song. It's just incredible, and I've heard so many different versions of it. I saw Elbow a few times, and every time they play it, it's just magic. And yeah, that's the song that just makes me feel really grounded and centered. And it's about family, and it's about memories, and it's about feeling secure in something, I think.
Wonderful. That's going to be quite a challenge for Nick to add to the CEO Advantage Spotify playlist. Yeah, I bet, because Matt, we've loved having you. I knew that there's 90 minutes that have gone in the blink of an eye, and we could have gone for another 90. I'm sure we will. It's been a great privilege having you with us today. So, and thank you, and thank you, Millie, for being just such a wonderful conversation.
Yep.
Oh, thank you. So good to talk to you both, and just really, really important stuff. We've got to make some change here. We've got to take some risks and do something, I think, and that's my takeaway from this.
Yeah, well, thank you for your thick-skinned optimism.
Yes.
And relentless thick-skinned optimism. You're a legend. The world needs more Matt.
So inspiring. Thank you, Matt.
Cheers. Thanks.